I warmly welcome our Honorable Chairman Sir and our Principal Dr. M. Leelavati Ma'am and all our faculties from various institutions and my dear faculty members and HODs of various departments. Once again, I welcome you all for the 6th day FDP session. Today we are going to have a special person, Dr. Maulina. Ma'am, I welcome you, ma'am. I heartfelt welcome you, ma'am. She is from University of Muhammadiyah country, Indonesia, and she is going to handle the session on writing conceptual research for undergraduate students. Ma'am, really feel much honored to have you for the session. Wonderful session. My heartfelt welcome to you, ma'am. Now I invite Shruti to introduce our special guest.
Thank you, ma'am. Good evening to one and all present here. I am filled with unbounded joy and enthusiasm to introduce our resource person, Dr. Maulina, who is an assistant professor at the Department of English Education, Universitas Muhammadiyah Kendari, Indonesia. Her research areas lie on the TEFL approaches and methods, social media utilization in education, learning material development, and gender issues in education. She graduated her doctoral degree from Universitas Negeri Makassar in English Education Department and got the short course at Griffith University, Australia. She has published a book and some articles in accredited national journals and reputed international journals. She is also a reviewer and an editor in some national journals. I'm much honored to introduce our today's chief guest resource person, Dr. Maulina ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for being here. And now the session is yours, ma'am.
Ma'am, you're not audible. Excuse me, ma'am, you're not audible.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Okay, good. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Mahalaxmi and Ma'am Shruti Zivaraman. First of all, I would like to thanks to the President of Cape Comorin Trust, Dr. Regin, and also the distinguished speaker, Dr. Ayo Gayeta. Maybe he is in this room because in this occasion, this evening, we would like to share the experiences, also some insights to the distinguished participants. Thank you. As I would like to share my slide, I hope the slide is okay. As I mentioned before about the topic I'm going to share today is about writing conceptual research for undergraduate students. This is my experience for 1 year, teaching students to have a kind of the final project of writing conceptual research based on the lessons or the subjects that is aimed to result a paper at the end of the meeting. So there are 4 things that I'm going to share today. The first one is we are going to see what's actually a conceptual research. And the second one is why is conceptual research important? And what is actually the difference between conceptual research and empirical research? The third one is the difference between conceptual framework or writing conceptual framework versus theoretical framework. Also the advantages of writing conceptual research and disadvantages, and how to write a conceptual research. The next things are about the sample of students writing. One sample from the Philippines class, because I was also as the lecturer of the university in the Philippines. And the second example is a class from Indonesia. it's also my own class. And next thing is about, oh yes, as I mentioned about, we are going to see what's actually the definitions of conceptual research. So it's on the slide, it's actually can be seen there. So conceptual research, as the name suggests, is a research that relates to abstract concepts and ideas. And it doesn't involve practical experimentation like field research or experiment research, but instead relies on the research analysis, synthesizing, analyzing available information on a given topic. Also, a conceptual research or a conceptual paper doesn't present original data like the empirical research, but it must present an original concept. So it talks about all about the concepts. It actually synthesizes knowledge from previous work on particular topic and presents it in a new context to provide a springboard for new research that will fill knowledge gaps. Okay, so that's actually the definitions of conceptual research. It is quite different between the empirical research or the field research or the action research, because it's actually only focused on the concepts or the abstract or the ideas of what we are going to analyze or to synthesize to build up the concept. And the next one is, why is conceptual research is important? The reason is because actually it gives the policy power. I mean, the conceptual research use is a potentially powerful way to inform policy. So when used conceptually, research serves to introduce new ideas, help people identify problems and appropriate solutions in new ways, and provide new frameworks to guide thinking and actions. So it's actually to inform the policy, or to give a potential powerful to inform a new policy, or even to give policy. And the next thing is the difference between conceptual research and empirical research. As mentioned before in the definitions of conceptual research, that conceptual research focus on the abstracts and also ideas of or concepts of the concept of, or the ideas or the abstracts of the things to be researched. So conceptual research actually involves, as I mentioned, abstract ideas and concept, while empirical research involves research based on observation, experimentations, and verifiable evidence. So measuring, investigating to through the observation experimentations for the empirical research. The next thing is that conceptual research actually used extensively in philosophical research, while the empirical research actually it could include both quantitative and qualitative studies, and is used extensively in scientific research, among other fields. The next one is conceptual research actually doesn't involve practical experimentation, because the practical experimentation just happened to the empirical research. And empirical research involves practical experimentation, and conclusion are based on the observable, measurable phenomena. So after talking about conceptual research and also empirical research, in writing conceptual research, we usually come up with the conceptual framework, and writing the empirical research, we come up with the theoretical framework. So this is actually the difference. So in writing the theoretical research or theoretical framework, it is usually in the form of deductive approach. So from the common one to the specific one, reviewing the most common, most ideas of the reviewing the literature to the specific one. While the conceptual research, it's in the form of inductive approach, like specifying to the analyzing into specific way to the complex way. And the next one is the theoretical framework is a study is based on the existing theory. For example, a theory of motivation, like the existing theory of motivation by Gardner, for example. And conceptual research, on the other hand, is something you can develop yourself based on this theory. The next thing is that conceptual framework is developed by the researcher to solve a particular problem that he or she wants to find solution, whereas the theoretical framework is based on the theories or general representation and of the relationship. So the general representations of the relationship between various things. So conceptual framework assists in finding way to solve the problem, and theoretical framework helps in relating identify specific problem in general. So to solve the problem is the conceptual framework, and the theoretical framework is help the writer, the researcher, identify the specific problem in general. The next one is that theoretical framework represents context of studies which are based on the particular theories or testing them or explaining them, or models based on studies in psychology. Whereas conceptual framework is comparatively broad, a term representing context of the concept that the study is based on explaining how and in what sense this term have been used in this particular study. Next, we are going to see actually what's the advantages of conceptual research. There are lots of advantages, but here I provide two. The first one is with the conceptual research, it's actually a convenient form of a research. Why? Because it only requires the evaluations of existing literature, and it proves to be a relatively convenient form of the research. So the researcher doesn't need to go through the observable or measuring something like in the laboratory or something like that. But it actually, the researcher do the literature review or something like that. And then the next advantages is requires few sources, and also it saves time and sources. Comparing to the empirical research, conceptual research actually it just need to, so the researcher needs actually more time in reading previous literature rather than spending more time in the experimentation. The next one is after talking about the advantages of having a conceptual research, we talk about disadvantage of conceptual research. Like advantages of conceptual research, disadvantage also here I actually there are some disadvantages, but I provide two. The first one is usually conducting or doing conceptual writing conceptual research, it's usually questionable in the form of its reliability and validity. Why? Because theory is based on the existing literature rather than experimentation and observation, and draw conclusions that are less fact-based and may not necessarily be considered reliable. And the second disadvantage is increased error or subjectivity. Usually the writer or the researcher use most of his or her time in writing the research of the conceptual research in subjective way. So oftentimes we see philosophical, for example, kind of write papers of conceptual research. Usually the researcher, for example, when they submit their research into a journal, they need to have kind of more times in order to revise based on the suggestion from the reviewer and also editors, because of most of the time they spend time to write in the, like, they tend to have a kind of subjection or subjectivity. And the conclusions are inferences drawn from existing text rather than practical experimentations. And how to write a conceptual research? Before I share the examples of 2 examples of the conceptual research in my class, actually I have seen some writers or some researchers come up with their own way in writing the conceptual research, but most of the time, the researcher or the writer do the following steps or following guidelines in writing conceptual research. Like the first of all, they write the abstract, but before the abstract, of course, they have to have a research title, and then the abstract, and after that, writing the introduction. In the introduction here is about explaining the need of an international relevance of the paper and a few statements about the existing literature. Then next one after the introduction, actually some of the writer or researcher in their paper, they come up with only one sub theme introduction, or sometimes they only write background. But some of the writer also split it like introduction and the background. So here in the background, detailed discussions of the previous literature on the very subject. So after stating the existing literature, it is followed by the detailed discussions of the previous subject, and the subject or the topic is discussed should be relevant with the with the literature. The next one is writing the purpose or aim of the research. Some of the research write the purpose of the aim in the form of the statement. Some of the research in writing conceptual research also write it in the form of a question, question. And the next one is major arguments along with the supporting literature after writing the purpose of the aim. And the next step is writing the discussion. In the discussion, the writer actually or the researcher write implication of future research or limitations. And after that, conclusion. And the last one is references. So let's have a look at one of example. Two examples. So as I mentioned previously, one sample from the class in the Philippines. So in the Philippines, actually, this is a complementation program last semester in 2021, and the subject called FLTM, Foreign Language Teaching Media, but talking about teaching media use in teaching English skills. So consisting of 44 students in the Neufa Eshiha University of Science and Technology, College of Education students, and most of the participants or most of the students were the female one, 85%, and male was 15%. The phenomena here is just like the same in the Philippines and in Indonesia. Indonesia, about the number of participants or number of students in each university. In Indonesia, most of the members of the program or department are female. I don't know why. Probably because of the number of female at this age higher than male one. And the age, most of the students were 20 years old, and also so from 20 years old to 23 years old. And before coming up to write the conceptual research project, we come up with the lessons or the meetings with about 8 meetings of telling what's actually the focus of the lessons or what's actually the lesson is. So because I taught them about foreign language teaching media, so in the first week 1 until 5, we talk about these lessons in through the Zoom, sometimes through the Google Meet also, sometimes through the WhatsApp Messenger, WhatsApp, also Facebook Messenger to get in touch, and to have a kind of explanation. So giving them explanations about the lessons, we run the class through the Zoom meeting. And for example, in week 1, before we come up or asking students to come up with a research project, we talk about definitions of media in second or foreign language teaching. And also we talk about traditional media available to classroom. And we also talk or discuss about queries dealing with language teaching media. So before they come up writing or searching literature review related to the media used in the teaching skills, English skills, they have actually their prior knowledge about what actually the lesson is. So that is actually the way I am teaching. Probably maybe the participants could also imitate or adapt the way the projecting or having a project, a last project of the subject we teach to students. So since I'm teaching the same course in the Philippines, also in Indonesia, I sometimes also I sometimes invite Indonesian students to the class of the Philippine students. The purpose is sharing the ideas, what was actually they have learned previously, and they could share each other. So they have they could communicate what actually they have in the previous week. For example, in a week 2, that was about sharing sessions. So we talk about computer in language teaching, one of the examples of the media used in language teaching. So all whole lessons or whole 1.5 hours to 2 hours, we talk about that computer in language teaching. And another sessions after we talk about what the media is and so on, and computer in language teaching, we continue share the ideas. Even it's in a Zoom meeting, I break actually the class into some small group into a small break the room, and then we talk about what actually are the kind of teaching media used in the foreign language in Indonesia and as a second language in the Philippines. So after having the course through the Zoom meeting, also some feedback through the Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, also through the email, we come up with the project. So after we have the students know they have the previous background of knowledge of the media in teaching English. So because the project or projecting students to have a final project which is published, and they could remember that they have in their life that they have actually enrolled in this class, and they could remember it anytime, anywhere, by actually after submitting, publishing, and they could read it many times, and they could also share. Okay, so the second steps after giving them the input about insights about foreign language teaching media. The second step is asking students to review journal articles. But in reviewing journal articles, we have actually, I asked students to focus on one question that they have to answer. That is, so this is the, for the lessons of foreign language teaching media. The question is, what are the most popular media used in teaching, listening? So we focus only for language skills, listening, speaking, reading, and writing, because number of students 44 I mentioned. So each skill will be discussed or will be reviewed or will be discussed by 11 students, 10 to 11 students. So they could have more insights by discussions. So the research question is, what are the most popular media used in teaching, listening, or speaking, or reading, or writing skills for the last 10 years? And we have the focus. So the previous literature or previous works they have to read was only for the last 10 years. For example, last time 2021 to 2011 to 2020. So only those article must be read. The rest they may read, but they may not put in the references. So there are two focus here. So they are going to see focus on the skills they are assigned. Listening, for example, if they are in a group of listening, and reading last 10 years articles talking about media used in teaching. This one, in teaching that skills. So I didn't ask students directly to write in the form of the narrative one, but first, the second step after giving the input, the second step is asking them to fill the tables. So the tables, so first, for the first week, they have to read 10 articles since they are in a group of 10. So one student must read one articles, and after that they could discuss and share and write in this form of the table. So some information they have to fill. The first one is references. Why actually I asked them to write the references. I asked them to actually know first, who is actually the writer, what the title, what year of the article was published, and to what journal the article was published, and where did they get. If they have the URL, they could attach the URL, so everyone can see back actually whether this is real, they read or not. So they write the references here. And writing the references also, I have a 1 week lesson for telling them how to write references and how to cite. And the second thing they have to feel is about the problem. So what's actually the writer, what did the writer write in the introduction part? So what's the problem of the research? So I asked them to write in a statement here, a brief problem they read from the article. And the next thing, the third one is the focus one, is about the media used. For example, in listening, for example, so the writer, for example, in the paper they use, for example, because this is not technology-based media, so I divide it into one. So not technology-based media and technology-based media. For example, this one is, for example, book, for example. So they have to write this one, media use is book, and they could narrate about 1 to 2 statements or sentence. And the next things after they have a look at what media is used, and the fourth one is writing who are the audience or who are the participants of the research. After they see, they also have to write or see how is the media operated. So for example, book here, the media of teaching particular language skills here, book. How is book is operated? How is book used in teaching? For example, in teaching speaking, they have to read and they have to find out in the articles, because why? It's very important to see these links, and they could narrate it later. And after seeing how is the media operated or how is the media used, the next thing is they have to have a look at the important results. I suggest them to have a look at the abstracts and also see the findings and the discussions. After they write the important results for about 3 to 4 or 2 to 4 sentences, I ask them to have a look at the conclusions. But the conclusion, they don't need to copy and paste, but they have to paraphrase, see, read, and then transfer it into this table, into their own words, but do not change the meaning of what the writers have written in their paper. So all these things have to be written in the form of the table before coming up to write the conceptual framework. So this method is, I have seen it a bit successful for about 1 year. So this is the examples. So I divided students into 2 groups of searching not technology-based media and technology-based media, focusing on articles published for the last 10 years, seeing the popular media used in particular language skills. So after they read or they write this one, it takes about 5 to 6 weeks writing or reading a lot of previous literature or relevant literature. And then they transfer it into the writing. So actually I have one of the project of these students have been published. The other ones are still in the form of the reviewing. So, so this is, for example, the so in writing and transferring the information from the table to the paper, it needs a step-by-step ways in leading the students. The first one is asking the students to write down the title of the research or the conceptual research that is eye-catching and that is important to be read and also attractive. So one of the example is this one, not technology-based media used in teaching listening skills, a recent literature review. And the writers consist, members of the writers, I myself as the lecturer. Why I put my name in the first place? Because 80%, 70 to 80% work, I work in that, helping the students to write a paper until the paper is published. Also, the rest one is the members of the students, consisting of 10 students. So, if we take these samples into our class, so every semester it will result 10 to more articles we produce for every semester. So you can imagine actually for one semester, if like this, if I group students into 4 groups, so listening, speaking, reading, and writing, for examples, so they consist of 8 articles for one semester, if it is in the form of the group work. But how about if it's in individual work? One thing is that hard work and time to assist the students or to guide the students. So these are actually the samples of the project-based learning, writing the conceptual research for the distance learning in the Philippines. And that is the first sample for the individual work. Now, no, for the group work. Now the sample for the individual work, sample number 2 in Indonesia in my own class. So the subject was about research methods in English language teaching. So the same like I taught Philippine students, like the first 2, 3 until 4 until 5 meetings, it was about the input of the lessons or the subjects, what's actually the subjects. And after that, filling out the tables. But before coming up, filling out the tables, I grouped the students, or I asked the students to focus on the things. Since the second sample I teach about research method, this is the difference between the previous samples. In the second sample, I asked students to read, so I add more skills, language skills. I didn't focus on the 4 skills like listening, speaking, reading, and writing, but I add 3 more language skills: pronunciation, grammar, and vocabulary. So I asked students to focus on these main keywords like listening, and then online or social media and digital technology. So what language, what research method used in teaching listening, utilizing social media, for example, for the last 10 years. So it is quite actually the pattern is similar, but actually the focus are different. The pattern, like in the previous sample, what are the most used media in teaching listening for the last 10 years? In the research method, what are the most used research methods in teaching listening utilizing social media for the last 10 years? So actually, you could actually imitate this by focusing on that keywords, or focus on that keywords. And it will result different way of contributing new knowledge or new way or new policy. So after I let students to focus on these keywords, I actually group them. So I have their names in this program, because this is offline face-to-face teaching class compared with the distance ones in the Philippines. I grouped them into the, no, I didn't group them. It is individual. So I asked them to work. So each one, each students will go with the listening and speaking and reading and writing and so on. And then the same with the previous one, I asked them to fill the form, but the form here is quite different. So actually the table is just like similar. So we have the reference, who are actually reference. I guide them on how to write the reference. I gave them the samples. One of the samples I gave them was the sample on writing references. One of the articles, the same, similar, a conceptual research paper published last year, 2021, in the Cape Comorin Trust in India. And this is one example, just the example. And then I asked them to write the problems, state the problems after reading the paper, and also research methods. Here there is the limitation, because I think I have to limit, or ask students to limit or to narrate the words into the limitations of words. So 50 to 150 words for the research methods. For example, in the research method, the researcher, your pre-experimental research, they have to narrate it. They could find it in the abstract one. They could also find in the research method or the methods or methodology. And then after that, I asked them to see the important results, write the important results from 100 to 150, and the conclusion 50 to 100 words. Why it's important to limit the words? They could actually easily transfer the words. You can imagine. So one article, they write, for example, 100 words, and 100 words. And then how about if they write, how about if they review it more than 5 articles for one kind of research method? So it will research more words. And then it will actually easy for us as teacher or lecturer to even to omit or to add the words, number of words based on the requirements of the particular journal. So it's quite a bit different. So in the previous sample, I just asked them to answer the first one question, but here I asked them to also answer in their conceptual research, answer the second questions. So in the first question, what kinds of research methods are commonly applied in studies of listening? For example, if they are assigned in a reviewing listening individually, utilizing social media or technology for the last 10 years. And how do these kinds of research methods operate to achieve the defined goals? These questions actually could be answered easily after seeing their answers on the tables we provide. So, oh yeah, I forgot to let you know that so actually there are lots of search engines for your students, for my students to search the articles. They could go on to the Google Scholar, Science Direct, and so on. But actually we have the limitation what articles they have to read or see. They are articles, if it's in the national scale, Indonesia, for example, it's accredited by the research or Ministry of Research articles. And if it's international journals, high impact journals, impact factor journals, and also the Scopus or Thomson Reuters Index journals. So we have the focus. So students will focus on that few focus and then could easily go on with their task. So after this is one of the results of one class. Since I taught 3 classes, could imagine for one semester in the previous class resulted 8 articles, and this one for one class for research method in English language teaching, it results 23 articles, and different person talking or writing different skills. Even actually number 1 to 3, they talk about the same skills like grammar, research method in teaching or learning grammar using, for example, social media. But actually their readings are quite almost different because tons or millions articles talking about that. So they could choose which are actually relevant. And all these articles, all these results are different. And they results different way of conclusions. So those 2 examples on how to projecting or make our class productive in asking students to write the conceptual research. As I would like to show you one example. Previous also I show you one example of a conceptual research title. This is one of another example in the research method in English language teaching examples. That title is Conceptualizing Research Methods Used in Teaching Listening Skills, because these students reviewed, synthesized all the literature review about listening skills using social media. So the focus is here. So listening skills and social media. All the articles are about teaching listening skills using social media for the last 10 years, and all the accredited national and international accredited journals. It takes time. So for example, if we teach 1 hour, 2 hours for 1 week, for example, to have a kind of projecting or letting students to have conceptual research at the end of the semester, it needs time. Even at the evening or night or even in the morning, we still assist them on how to write the title and so on until the abstract, how to compose the abstract. But before the abstract, actually I let them to write the introduction and so until conclusion and back to abstract, because the abstract is the sum up the yes. So, and how to write the keywords and so on, and write the introduction. Actually, the introduction here I only take a few. Lots of our introductions, and the research question, the research methods, and then the findings and the conclusions, also the references. If you have a look at here, the references has been actually written in the APA style, 7th edition. And some of the students, I let them to write, follow the three ways, like manual writing manual references through the word writing references through word or documents, and through the Mendeley. So students in one semester, they get a lot of ways in they get a lot of vocabularies and so on, ways in write, know how to write or compose scientific research and so on, until they come up to the final task is composing their own empirical research. This is one of the important of letting the students to write the conceptual research, because at the end, actually they could, when they do the empirical research, it's quite easier because they have actually do the hard work, and then they come to observe and measure something that to come up with their own real research. So I hope that is the example of my that is the example of how to write the conceptual research. So I hope everyone is, I hope the explanation is understandable, because of my pronunciation is quite like different. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am, you're clear and very much informative, ma'am. Very much information. So plenty of information you have given, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Doctor.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Participants, dear participants, shall we go with the question session, ma'am?
Sorry.
Shall we go with the question session, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Dear participants, you can ask your questions to ma'am. Dear teaching fraternities, whatever the doubts and clarifications regarding this topic, you can clear from ma'am.
Maybe there is no any questions. I hope that is clear.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, ma'am. Good evening.
Good evening,
ma'am. No, ma'am, there's no doubt you have a very clear, pronunciation. So do not feel skeptical. You spoke really well, comparatively better than the other people from the foreign origin. It was clear. You emphasized a lot on listening, speaking, reading, and writing, right, ma'am?
Yes.
And I guess your curriculum basically emphasizes on it. So what do you think, ma'am, when a teacher focuses on these four important components, L, R, S, W, does the teaching become more effective? What does your experience say about it?
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am, for your questions. May I answer it directly?
Of course, ma'am, of course.
Thank you. Okay, so about the samples of focusing on four language skills, listening, speaking, reading, and writing, actually that was the focus on letting students to focus on that skills, reviewing or reading articles in that four language skills. But actually, in my experience in the real class, teaching the four language skills is not, actually, I also integrate the rest skills like vocabulary, pronunciation, grammar, and so on in the class. So not only focus on the one skill, for example, in teaching, but you have to like integrate the other skills. So to let students to understand better the language in my context. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Agreed. I too have the same consent. Thank you so much, ma'am. It was wonderful. It was pleasure listening to you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.